Let's talk about how money anxiety hijacks your body and your brain. So, you're not eating because you're hungry, right? You're eating because your nervous system thinks you're about to starve. This episode, I want to get all up into financial stress eating. Specifically, I want to talk about why money anxiety sends your body straight down into that survival mode and makes food feel totally out of control. You're not crazy. This really does happen. If you've ever noticed that having a bad bank statement leads to binges, yeah, I just want to say, don't worry, you're not losing it. I have absolutely been there too. And the thing is that your body is doing something really quite ancient, something that was literally built to do. But the problem is, it can be really, really hard to tell the difference between a famine and an overdraft. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about that biology behind why financial stress triggers your overeating. And I'm going to walk you through what's happening not only in your nervous system when money gets tight, but I'm going to tell you why your willpower is really quite irrelevant here. I'll give you a few real practical tools that you can use the next time that urge hits after opening your banking app. So let's talk about it. Hey, bestie, welcome back to the potty. This is the potty for women who are done diluting themselves with diet culture's bullshit, and they are so more than ready to be going and turning into their highest, fullest, most vibrant selves. So if you're new here, hey, I'm glad that you found my little corner of the internet. I'm Nick, and this is the show where we get into the real stuff. So it's not going to be lots of basic tips like eat more mindfully. I'm not going to be telling you to just try a bit more journaling. No, we're going to be talking about the mechanics of why you're stuck in this cycle with food. It's real. It's raw. It's chats from a therapist, me, who has actually also lived through this shit and knows what to do about it. And something I am very familiar with is the cycle of debt and financial stress and how that loops in with the binge eating. And I wanted to create an episode on it because I keep having this convo with other people too. And it's not just one or two conversations, it's many different clients, different backgrounds, but the same theme, the theme of money stress and binges, and then shame about the binges, and then the stress about the money, and then more binging, and round we go. So I thought we should really talk about this properly on the podcast because there is so much that makes sense here. And I know it would have been really helpful for me to hear it. Money stress played a real part in my own binge eating journey, and I'm going to share some stuff. I also want to note as well, like a lot of us really are doing it tough financially right now, not just in New Zealand, but globally. Or we've all been at different points in our lives, right? And you've noticed that maybe during those periods, your eating goes a little bit sideways. You're not imagining it if that's the case. There are real reasons for that, biological and psychological ones. And for some of us, the binging then goes ahead and adds a whole other layer of pain because now you're spending money that you probably don't have on food that you didn't really even want. And of course, makes everything feel heavier. So let's talk about that. And let's talk about what's going on. Most people understand stress eating is a thing, right? You know, I know. Sometimes we use food to soothe. We use food to regulate. We use it to ground. Cool. That's actually okay from time to time, as long as it's not the only tool that we're using and the only way we're tending to our emotion and our stresses. Go back and check out earlier episodes on those if you want to go a little deeper into the emotional eating. But what I don't think is covered enough, and I definitely haven't covered it enough, is why financial stress specifically hits a little different. I really don't feel like it's the same as being stressed about a presentation at work. It's not quite the same as arguing with your partner. It's a different flavor, right? Money stress carries a different type of threat. And I think your body knows that. If we think about it from an evolutionary perspective, for most of human history, not having enough resources just meant one thing, right? You might not eat. Scarcity of any kind was tied back to food, not really to money. But no food meant no survival. So your brain hasn't really caught up with the fact that you live in 2026. There's probably a supermarket down the road, and you probably even have stacks of dried pasta or a few tinned beans in your pantry, right? There is food there. But your brain is still running on software from thousands of years ago. And that software is saying that when resources are threatened, like money, we stockpile our calories. And we do it now. That's not a personal failing of you. That is just old hard wiring. That was just evolution. So what is actually happening in your body? So biology, because I think this is like really, really quite fascinating. When you are under financial stress, your body triggers your stress response system. And let's just keep it super simple. So what happens is your cortisol goes up, adrenaline kicks in, and your body shifts into that threat mode. So here's the bit that matters for food. Cortisol doesn't just make you feel anxious, right? When stress becomes chronic, and for a lot of us, financial stress absolutely is chronic, cortisol starts increasing your appetite for those high calorie, high fat, high sugar foods. Not just occasionally, consistently. And your body is doing this on purpose. In a survival context, think about back to those caveman times. Those foods are the ones that give you the most energy the fastest, so like the fruits and things. Your body wants them because it thinks you're going to need them. It thinks you're about to run or fight or go days without food. It cannot tell the difference between a famine or any real scarcity and having a $47 bank balance. You still feel that same amount of threat. Your body still responds the same way. It prepares to fight. And I know this from the inside, like from my lived experience, not just from my training, not just seeing it in my clinic. And when I was in the deepest trenches of binge eating disorder, I also happened to be broke. So I was a student and I was always spending my last $2 on things like hot chip or pie for lunch because that's really all we could afford. And then later that same day, something would just snap in me. The restriction, the stress of not being able to grab groceries, the shame of holding it all. And I actually had a secret credit card and I would use that to go and buy binge hauls. And my partner didn't know what I was doing. At the time, I felt an immense shame. Immense. Put a lot of pressure on us. That's my dirty little secret. So I had this credit card, and from time to time, that stress of being stuck in that binge cycle, of not being able to make ends meet, of struggling with uni, of my body changing, feeling so alone, feeling so exhausted, I would snap and have a binge, and I would fund that binge with this card. And of course, what did that do? That only made my financial problems worse. I racked up a lot of debt at that time. The credit cards were fueling those binge hauls. They were also fueling diet products, diet programs that I thought would fix me, pills, skinny teas, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't just the binges, it was the diet culture stuff too. And I also drained my savings that I'd been putting away since I was 14 years old, doing paper rounds and working at the supermarket to finance a weight loss surgery. I convinced the government to let me to withdraw my retirement funds, my first home funds, to cover that surgery. And even then, it wasn't enough to cover the full bill. And since my credit score was so shitty, the bank said they wouldn't help me. The only person who would was a seedy loan company. So I said yes, and I took what I could get. And I recently added it all up, the credit cards, the binges, all the cleansers, the surgery, every single thing that I did to try and fix this problem I had with my body and food. All those things added up to be about 40 grand. And I only paid that off like 18 months ago. So when I say that financial stress and binge eating are connected, I mean it. And I mean it in both directions. Because your financial stress causes the binges, and the binges can cause financial stress. It's a loop that only feeds itself. And I just wanted to be real with you because I know a lot of you are experiencing it, and I don't want you to feel ashamed of yourself. But I want you to take control. So we know that cortisol is driving you towards the food. And it's also suppressing the part of your brain responsible for rational decision making. The prefrontal cortex, the part at the front that normally says, hey, shouldn't get that Uber Eats right now. Actually, I can't afford it. That's offline. Your brain is in survival mode. Long-term thinking doesn't really become the priority. Just getting through tonight is. So when you open the fridge and you're not that hungry and you've suddenly eaten half a jar of peanut butter or all the pickles or whatever it was, you're not being weak. You just, that prefrontal cortex was literally not running the show at that moment. So when your brain comes back online and it sees the mess that you've made, of course, we feel ashamed. Shame's adding stress. More stress means more cortisol. More cortisol means that urge comes back stronger each time. I hope that's helpful to hear that, because what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to give you some space to give yourself some grace and some self-compassion, and to understand kind of the sequence of events that keeps happening. Because once you understand it, once things start to make sense, you have power to make choices. I really had to pull my socks up financially. I really had to decide to get well, because not only was I screwing up my mental health, my physical health, I was also screwing my future. Like I said, I only just paid off those debts 18 months ago, but I haven't binged since 2019. So it's taken me an additional 6, nearly 7 years to recover my financial well-being after recovering from the binge eating. So any sort of recovery journey for food freedom, it's not just healing your relationship with food, it's healing your relationship with so many different areas of your life. The food and the eating, yeah, your body, but also the way you relate to money, the career that you're building, the family that you're building, your connections, your trust in yourself. I really used to become extremely dysregulated, even thinking about money. I couldn't even look at a spreadsheet without crying, or becoming so dysregulated, or afraid that my partner was going to yell at me or attack me. And it was kind of valid, because, I was a little out of control with that. And so I had to take accountability and really see it for what it was, and see that cycle, see how it was all feeding each other, and decide that I don't want that anymore. You know what's really cool? Binge free since 2019. I'm so freaking proud of that. But in a way, what I'm even more proud of right now, and this is the long-term ongoing impact of doing this work and healing, is that in 6 weeks' time, I'm moving into my first house. Finally hitting that goal. I'm 33 next week. So moving into my first home, we've built it. I worked and hustled so damn hard to be able to see this come to life. Because as I said, I took all of that money out of my savings as a young woman to fund my surgery. So I can say I feel like I finally recovered financially, or at least got myself to a place where I feel safe and grounded and regulated. And you deserve that too, because as we were saying, that means my cortisol levels are all good. It means that I trust myself. It means that I can focus on building an even bigger, bolder, brighter life, because I have the resources to do so. You deserve that. So let's talk about it a little bit more in terms of you. So there's another layer to this that I think is really important to mention. And that is that when we feel financially stressed, we often shift into a much broader scarcity mindset. So as I was saying before, it didn't end up just being about money, right? It became being about everything. A scarcity mindset is a mental state where your brain starts narrowing its focus on what you don't have, on resources that feel limited. And that makes your entire future feel uncertain. And you make decisions from a place of lack and from a place of doubt and playing small and being fearful. And yeah, that's going to bleed into your relationship with food. When you're in that scarcity mindset, food can become one of the things that you kind of feel like you have access to, right? A little bit of availability. And so if your bank account feels out of control, the snack cupboard isn't. And your brain really does clock that. I think that's why I keep going for the credit card and grabbing the Uber Eats. I just wanted to grab hold of something and feel like I had some choice and some power and some control. And research also shows that when our mental bandwidth is consumed by financial worry, we have less cognitive capacity for everything else. And that's, of course, going to include regulating your eating, noticing those hunger and fullness cues, making choices that just feel in alignment with your values. So if it feels tough, again, it's not a failure of yours. You're just cognitively depleted. There is a difference. And I know it's a cruel irony because that shame of overeating is just adding to the stress and the loop gets tighter. And the binging is costing you money you don't have. It just adds that financial shame layer on top of the food shame. No wonder it's so hard. No wonder it feels unbearable. But as I said, recovery is a long-term game. And it's so worth playing that game because there's going to be a point where you feel a relief. And I'm going to say this again. I know I'm a broken record here and I keep repeating it, but willpower is not the answer. Willpower requires prefrontal cortex activity, that thinking part of your brain, the part of your brain that's going offline when you're under stress. So telling someone that they need to just try harder around food when they're under financial stress is like telling someone to, I don't know, run a race with a broken leg, right? The mechanism required is just not available. So many women that I work with, and you'll have heard this in what I was just sharing about myself, we are all internalizing this story that we binge because of a fault of our own. And that everyone else seems to be doing okay. I really truly believe that story too. Absolutely. I thought that if I just really, really tried harder and had more self-control, picked a better diet plan, it would just stop. But really, I just went further and further and further into debt, chasing those fixes. And the fix was never about food. It was never about really anything other than my nervous system. No one told me that. And other people aren't fine, by the way. Well, some are, but they're just not talking about it. Or they're coping in different ways that don't happen to involve food or spending. Binging under stress actually is a very common human response. So I just want you to reframe and be like, okay, the goal here isn't more willpower. The goal here is regulating my nervous system. So willpower isn't what I'm relying on. And one more thing to acknowledge, just a bit of modern money context, is that yes, we are living through bloody hard economic times. Yes, the cost of living is really quite brutal. Housing is increasingly out of reach. Wages are not keeping up. And a lot of women in our community are dealing with this. And it's real. It's real, legitimate financial stress. It's not imagined. It's not an anxiety spiral. It's actual material hardship. And I think that context really matters in this conversation too. Okay? Because sometimes this eating, as we've been saying, yes, it's about your nervous system. Your nervous system is exhausted. You may also be experiencing grief for working incredibly hard and still feeling like you're not getting ahead, or grief of having a life that doesn't quite look like what you had planned. And I think that's really real. And I think it is painful. And so, of course, using food to soothe that kind of pain, it is a comfort. And it's the first comfort most of us ever experience. When we were fed as babies, that's how we learned that someone loved us, someone was caring for us. And so we will have this deep, deep wiring between food and safety. So if you're feeling financially unsafe, turning to food is nothing to be ashamed of. It's just something to be understood. So what do we do with all of this? First thing I want you to do is I just want you to name what's happening. Name it, be real. When you notice you're reaching for food and it's not physical hunger, try saying out loud or in your head something like this. Hey, my nervous system is actually activated right now. This is a stress response. And that small little moment of naming it is going to bring your prefrontal cortex back online. So it's not fixing the stress, but it's just interrupting that automatic loop. Second tool I want to give you, regulate before you try to reason. Again, when we want to think our ways out of these physiological stress responses, you've got to let it move through your body first. So, do that. It doesn't have to be a big meditation. You don't have to sit there for an hour and do breath work. It doesn't have to be anything too much. Make it easy for yourself. Do 10 slow belly breaths. Shake your hands out. Do a full body shake. Jump up and down. Put your feet on the earth. Feel the ground for 30 seconds. That can actually be enough to start shifting your nervous system out of that threat mode. Third tool is we're going to reduce food restriction. And I know this is going to feel counterintuitive, but if you're under financial stress and you're also restricting what you eat purposely, you are running on 2 scarcity signals at the same time. Okay, so like your bank account is saying there's not enough and your eating is saying there's not enough. Your body can't tell them apart. Both are registered as scarcity. Both are registered as famine. And so when money is tight, the answer to stress eating is not going to be actually to eat less. It's just going to be to make sure that you're eating enough and regularly. Take that extra bit of scarcity signaling off the table. Last thing I want to share with you, number 4, is to find a non-food way to signal safety to your nervous system and try to do this every day. As I said again, keep the barrier low. Don't make it hard for yourself. And it doesn't have to cost anything. So it could be a hot shower, a walk outside, talking to a friend, laying on the floor with your eyes closed for 5 minutes. Just something that tells your body that in this moment, you are okay and that this is going to be manageable. And I know none of this fixes the financial stress. I'm going to be real about that, but it can stop that binge shame spiral from piling on top of everything else. And I do think that matters. After all, I spent a decade with both of these things running at the same time, the binge stress and the money stress. And so I know how much heavier everything feels when they're both feeding each other. Okay, so that's what I've got for you today. The short story of it is money stress does trigger those ancient survival instincts that are driving your body towards food. It's biology. It's not a weakness of yours. Willpower won't work here because the part of your brain that runs willpower is not even online. So we regulate. We reduce restriction, making sure that we're eating regularly, and we name it for what it is. Remember, you're not out of control at the moment. You're just a human with a nervous system that was built for a world that really no longer exists. Please practice lots of self-compassion. Look after yourself and DM me if you need any support. Once you understand these kind of things, you can start working with them instead of fighting them all the time. This episode landed for you. Awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. And if you're ready to break up with this binge restrict cycle for good and you want to fix your life in ways that go way beyond just food and eating, then I want you to reach out to me. Check the details in the show notes. Everything you need is in there. Share this with a friend. Share it with a bestie who might find it helpful. Pop it in your stories. And remember that every time someone listens to this, it helps to push it out a little bit further to more women all around the world. So thank you for listening. And I will see you next week. Take care. Ciao. All right, besties, that's a wrap for today. If you want to go deeper, check out the links in my show notes. You're going to find free resources, ways we can work together, and more details on my signature program, The Breakup. This is your roadmap to help you to break free from binge and emotional eating for good. If this episode has helped you, please hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're feeling extra kind, leaving a quick review really helps this podcast to reach more women who need it. Take care of your beautiful self, bestie, and I'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.